Hey everyone, so today we're going to be talking about a component on this AR-15 here. This is the CMMG Banshee based AR-15 that we built for my wife as her first AR-15. However, today we're going to be highlighting the lower receiver, which is one of the Sharps Brothers Livewire lower receivers. Now, I want to get my biases or possible biases right out of the gate, because this one's going to be quite a bit different than any of the other biases that I've mentioned before. And that is, obviously, this lower receiver was provided at no cost by Sharps Brothers for me to review. However, what makes this one different is I actually know the owner of Sharps Brothers quite well outside of doing this review. Him and I actually trained at the same jiu-jitsu gym briefly, so I have more of a relationship with John Sharps of Sharps Brothers than I do most of the other products that I review. Now, that I don't believe that is going to come into play here as far as what my opinions are of this receiver, but that's still something I think you guys should be aware of before going too deep into this review, so that you can take that into an account when trying to make up your own mind about the review and about the product here. Now, one of the other weird things about this review is I'm going to have less actual shooting footage with this thing than I do typically with most guns, and that is because, being my wife's AR-15, she's not a huge fan of being on camera. So while I've got quite a few rounds through this receiver, I don't have as much shooting footage with it, but I'll try to compensate for that with some other cool footage to be able to roll in and pictures and whatnot else. So this thing has probably just the lower receiver. The gun itself quite a bit more, but the lower receiver has about 600 to 700 rounds through it in 9mm exclusively, even though it is a standard AR-15, and that's again because of the 9mm conversion mags for the CMMG Banshee system. However, this is a standard AR-15 lower. It will work with any upper receiver, no problem. It still gives you all of the same compatibility that you would expect with a lower receiver. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pull this guy apart so that we can actually see the lower receiver in of itself. So the Sharps Brothers Livewire receiver is a ambidextrous receiver that integrates a lot of features that are pretty popular on the market right now. However, I think at a very appealing price point compared to what most people are familiar with Sharps Brothers doing in the past. So let's go ahead and quickly run over the features. So up front, we've got a slightly flared mag well, and that's in regards to the standard mil-spec lower receivers. This thing has a much larger magazine well to be able to index magazines off of, which, as I have been doing a lot more night vision stuff lately, is something I greatly appreciate because you can't quite see everything going on right in front of you. So flared mag wells is something I am definitely becoming a fan of. You also have an integrated trigger guard, which is becoming more standardized on some of the nicer lower receivers out there in the forged world, which, for reference, this is a forged lower receiver as opposed to a lot of the billet receivers that Sharps Brothers has done in the past, including with the Livewire series. Standard trigger group, obviously, standard pistol grip is going to work here. Standard safety, everything else, like I said earlier, is cross-compatible with your standard AR-15 components, all the way back to your buffer back here, including this does have the ability to use a set screw on the rear takedown pin to hold those components in. However, one of the big differences we have here in regards to a lot of the other forged lower receivers out there is some ambidextrous controls built in, namely the ambidextrous bolt release. So while this shares a lot of commonality with a lot of other popular forged lowers on the market, namely like the M4E1 from Aero Precision, this one is now adding some of the ambidextrous controls that are, again, I think greatly appreciated by a lot of end users out there. So I'm going to go ahead and put this thing back together later, and we'll talk a little bit more about that bolt release, as well as rolling in some footage, the little footage I can convince my wife to be in, as far as how this thing actually works in practice. But again, is a very welcome feature and something that I think is an excellent addition, especially at the price point of this lower receiver. Now, I do want to mention the aesthetics of this lower receiver. While aesthetics are not the most important part of your AR-15, in most cases at least, it's definitely something that can be appreciated, and I do like the aesthetics of the Sharps Brothers Livewire receiver in comparison to a lot of the standard mil-spec receivers out there. I like the lines and I like the look of it personally. I've never been a huge fan of the traditional billet receivers that Sharps Brothers has done with like the Jack, the Warthog, the Hellbreaker, their new like samurai style one. I've never been huge on those. I get it. I appreciate it. I understand why people are into it. It's just not my thing personally. However, the Livewire is more of their, I guess, standard AR-15 receiver looking receiver, for lack of better words. And that is just kind of more in line with what I'm looking for. And again, as a result of the much more simple manufacturing process over like the Skull or the Warthog or anything like that, this thing is going to be a lot cheaper than those, again, also being forged. So just for reference, I've mentioned the cost. I might as well talk about that right now. These things come into market around 130 bucks, which is exceedingly reasonable. I think most of the time, one of the receivers I already mentioned, the M4E1s, those are pretty commonly right around like 120 bucks. So for about a $10 difference, being able to add something like the ambidextrous bolt release kind of makes it a no-brainer in my opinion. But again, we can talk more about making up your mind towards the end of the video here. But let me go ahead and throw this thing back together on the upper just so we can show a couple things. First of all, that ambidextrous bolt release, and then I've also got an assortment of magazines next to me so we can see how it fits with those. I will say that the fitment between the upper and lower is really nice. I haven't adjusted the tension at all. I'm going to hold this up to the mic so we can hopefully hear, but there's very little movement. Hopefully you can see that. Very little movement between the upper and lower receiver here, which this also happens to be a Sharps Brothers upper and Sharps Brothers handguard. Now, it is worth mentioning that I did in fact pay for the handguard and the upper receiver. Even though the lower was provided at no cost, the upper receiver and the handguard have been constant throughout this whole project. So to demonstrate the bolt hold open or bolt release capability, I'm going to go ahead and just throw an empty magazine in here so it'll lock open. And I'm going to have to obviously adjust the mic here after the fact, so I apologize if I forget to do that. But now with the bolt locked open, you can see that just with a push of the button here on this release, we're able to close that bolt. So for righties, that's really nice because you don't have to worry about changing your fire control grip. However, that's even a big thing for lefties, because I know a lot of my lefty friends out there who will do their magazine changes will then use insert their magazine here and then use their thumb just like a righty would on the other side to then drop the bolt. So even if you're right-handed or left-handed, that is added functionality and definitely something nice. Now, I will also roll in some footage of me shooting this, and I am so practiced using my thumb on the ping pong paddle over here to release the bolt that even when I was consciously trying to use that bolt release, I still use my thumb about half of the time. But that's more of a practice thing. That's just something I've done thousands and thousands of times, so it's even hard to get my brain to do something else. That being said, for a lot of you out there watching this video, that is going to be a very welcome feature and one that I definitely am not going to complain about. Again, it's my PWS lowers allow me to do the same thing, and if I can pay the same price and get that feature, I don't see why you wouldn't want that. Now, again, this is one of the Magpul magazines that has been converted with the CM. I don't remember the brand that makes the guts, but the ones that CMMG uses to convert Magpul mags to 9mm, because this is a 30 round 9mm magazine right now. And just for demonstration purposes, unloaded, drops free, no problem. I've got a, let's see, this is just a standard 5.56 Magpul M3 magazine. Again, drops no problem, unloaded. This is a Gen 2 Magpul PMag. Again, drops free, no problem. This is a aluminum D&H magazine. That fits in just fine and drops free. This is a loaded Lancer mag. I wanted to run some loaded polymer mags just to see if the swelling of the polymer, if there is any, is going to play a role. And I'm not going to let this one hit the ground. That one does just fine. And it's not because I'm worried about Lancer mag shedding rounds. It's because courtesy for my neighbors. And then the loaded Gen 3P mag, again, drops free, no problem. I don't have any other magazine styles to test it with because all I use are GI style mags in aluminum or steel, or Lancers or Magpuls. So hopefully that'll suffice. Those are the only magazines I recommend using, so they work very well with all of those magazines that I would recommend. So is this lower receiver for you? Now, I know there's a lot of people who are of the opinion that lower receiver doesn't matter. There's only like 5 forges, bro, so it doesn't really matter. I can tell you, as someone who handles firearms for a living at a gun store, helping customers build their guns, building tons of guns myself, and taking armorer courses, even if you have the same exact company making the forgings, the level of quality control and attention to detail is not the same from one company to another. I mean, people have probably seen even the picture of the LMT lower that came out recently where the hole was not drilled for the buffer detent. So stuff happens, mistakes are made, not everything gets done, and not every company handles quality control in the same way. Now, I think that LMT is an outlier. I think no one would criticize those guys as far as quality in general. But again, not all companies are created equal, and when you get a $50 receiver, one of the things that helps bring the cost down is that diminished level of quality control. So in my opinion, you should be looking at around that $100 range for a lower receiver anyway. And again, I think the biggest competitor to this being the Aero Precision M4E1, of which is a receiver I'm very familiar with and have owned several, being at about within $10 of the same price. Like I said, I think I looked on Rainier Arms and these are like $125 or $130 right now. To me, it's a no-brainer. If I'm paying the same amount, again, plus or minus $10 that I would for an M4E1, why not get the added functionality of the ambi bolt release? And again, I just prefer the aesthetics of the Sharps Brothers receiver. I think the receiver set, upper and lower combo together, looks really nice, looks really clean. Also is a little bit different, so for people who want to stand out, if that's a thing that's important to you, this is going to help separate you from a lot of people who are currently running the Aero M4E1s. And again, with COVID, we've seen differing things as far as quality control even coming out of Aero Precision at the gun store, whereas Sharps Brothers has not had that same issue in my experience. So if any of you guys have experience with the Sharps Brothers lower receivers, definitely let me know if you have used them, or even the other billet lowers, again, like the Jack, the Warthog, the Hellbreaker, or any of those other ones like the new Samurai one. Definitely let me know what your experience has been, how the fitment is with different upper receivers, how it is with different magazines, if you've had any issues. You can throw that in the comment section down below. I do want to say thanks to my patrons for helping to make a video like this one possible. Even 9mm ammo right now is not extremely cheap, so being able to hand load that and so my wife and I can get some quality range time is definitely a good thing. So thanks to them for that. Because of that, I post all my content over there early. We also do some exclusive content. We have a Discord server, all that kind of stuff. If any of that sounds interesting to you, definitely let me know. If there's other Sharps Brothers products you want to see reviews on, definitely let me know, whether that be like the upper receiver or the handguard up here. Again, definitely let me know that. But with all that being said, as always, I hope you got something out of this video, and I really appreciate you watching.